The story begins with Jensen Ames, who is an industrial worker and ex-convict. He learns that the steel mill where he works is shutting down and won't be paying the workers their full wages. That's why the workers are protesting in front of the industry. As frustration among the workers grows, anti-riot police arrive there. The police are responding to even the smallest provocation with violence. When Jensen sees his co-workers being beaten, he steps in and fights back. During the process, he takes down a few officers in the chaos. By the time Jensen makes it home, it's already night. He greets his wife and then goes upstairs to check on their baby, but he is completely unaware that a masked intruder has broken into the house. While Jensen is upstairs, the criminal seizes the opportunity to murder his wife in the kitchen. When Jensen comes back downstairs, the man ambushes him from behind and knocks him unconscious. Before leaving, the intruder places the murder weapon in Jensen's hand and makes a taunting shooting gesture with his gloved hand. He had framed Jensen for the crime and left the house by the time the police arrived there. Jensen wakes up moments later to find the police arresting him for his wife's murder. 6 months later, Jensen is transferred to Terminal Island Prison. Upon arrival, he is greeted by guard Ulrich, who sprays him with freezing water and also allows another officer to hit him. After that, the guard escorts Jensen to a cell shared with 3 other prisoners intent on beating him up. However, when Ulrich returns later in the hope of enjoying the aftermath, he sees that Jensen is a skilled fighter who has already knocked all his cellmates out cold. The next morning, Jensen heads to the mess hall for breakfast. He's quietly observed by prisoners Coach, Gunner, and Lists, who recognize him as a former champion driver whose record-breaking career ended in tragedy. The atmosphere suddenly shifts when 2 prisoners, Pachinko and his friend, approach Jensen. They provoke him by spitting on his food and insulting him by calling him a wife killer and child abuser. Hearing this, Jensen snaps and attacks Pachinko, but before the fight escalates, the guards intervene and drag him away to meet Claire Hennessy, who is the prison warden. In her office, Claire reveals that she knows all about Jensen's past as a phenomenal driver. She offers him a deal. She wants Jensen to take on the role of Frankenstein, who was the masked racer in this death race. The real Frankenstein died on the operating table after his last race, but the public doesn't know this yet. This makes it easy for someone else to take his place behind the mask. Frank was a fan favorite and an iconic legend, which is why Hennessy is determined to keep his death a secret. She needs the myth of Frankenstein to live on and revive the show's ratings since his passing. Hennessy tells Jensen that according to the rules, a driver earns their freedom after winning 5 races. Since Frankenstein had already won 4, Jensen would only need 1 more victory to secure his release. Despite the tempting prospect of freedom, Jensen hesitates because risking his life in a deadly race isn't a decision he takes lightly. But Hennessy won't take no for an answer. She threatens him with solitary confinement to ensure that he can't reveal her secret in the prison. Now Jensen is left with no choice but to agree with the offer. Jensen is then taken to the prison's auto shop, where he meets Coach and his team, the mechanics responsible for maintaining Frankenstein's car. They explain the rules to Jensen. Every team operates independently, and there's no helping each other. Jensen also notices a large workshop where Hennessy has been secretly building something for weeks. Only a select few people, including Coach's team and a handful of guards, know Jensen is the new Frankenstein. Hennessy's control over the prison ensures her secret remains safe. After that, Coach introduces Jensen to his car, which is a heavily modified Mustang V8 Fastback. It's equipped with an array of offensive and defensive gadgets, but no ammunition is loaded on the car until race day to prevent prisoners from attempting an escape. The coach tells Jensen that escaping is not an option from this hell, as the prison is on an island. The only way out is a narrow bridge, which would be swarmed with police cars and helicopters at the first sign of a breakout. After getting familiar with the car, Jensen joins the team in the prison yard to continue their conversation. Coach explains the structure of the race, which is divided into 3 stages. In the first 2 stages, the goal is to eliminate as many opponents as possible. In the final stage, speed is the key to crossing the finish line first. Each driver is assigned a navigator, who is typically a woman brought in from the women's facility. The only exception is Joe, who uses a team member instead. He's notorious for shifting through female navigators so quickly that it makes even the audience uncomfortable. Then, a team member, Lists, begins briefing Jensen on the key drivers in the race, all of whom are present in the yard. There's 14K, who is a Triad member and MIT graduate. Then there is Hector Grimm, who is a certified psychopath who idolizes Hennessy too. After that, we get introduced by Slovo Pachenko, who is the Aryan Italian Brotherhood leader, and Travis Colt, who is a disgraced ex-NASCAR star. Their conversation is cut short when Joe and his crew approach Jensen. They insult Jensen and deliver the message that this race is only between Joe and Frankenstein. Just then, a van arrives in the prison, which is returning inmates from a work area. Jensen notices something unusual about their wrists. They're wearing GPS tracking bracelets on their hands. The sight triggers a realization to Jensen that the man who killed his wife had been wearing one of those bracelets too. The day of the first race stage finally arrives. Jensen is given Frankenstein's clothes, mask, and even his ring to complete the preparation. His appearance alone draws back the viewers the show had lost. Before the game starts, the coach advises Jensen to avoid talking to the other drivers, as maintaining Frankenstein's silent mystique is part of the act. However, he's allowed to remove the mask while in the car, as the windows are made of mirrored glass, and Case is already in on the secret. As they prepare for the race, Jensen asks Case why she's in prison. She reveals that she killed a cop who was her own husband. She killed him because he was abusive. Their conversation is cut short as the race begins. The first lap isn't too violent, as weapons won't activate until the second of the 3 laps. Still, the drivers do their best to shove each other off the track. Thanks to Case's knowledge of the course, Jensen manages to stay neck and neck with Joe at the front.
Dog left for 100 feet.
When Case spots a shortcut, she guides Jensen through it, which allows him to take the lead. Once the second lap starts, Hennessy activates the shields and weapons.
Activate swords and shields.
Now, the drivers must steer their cars over special manholes, hitting all 4 wheels to enable their attacking gadgets. Chaos erupts as the race turns into a full-scale battle. Also, Hennessy ups the stakes by activating the death heads, which are actually the deadly obstacles placed strategically on the track. A driver named Grimm uses them to his advantage and kills a minor driver by slamming his car into one of the traps. He then slows Joe down by shooting oil at his car and temporarily knocks him back.
Look out! Oil!
But Grimm's reign is short-lived. Soon, 14K takes him out by launching a missile and forcing Grimm off the track.
That's my name!
As his car crashes and Grimm comes out of it, Joe finishes him off by running him over. During the race, Jensen manages to activate the weapons, but his machine gun jams.
Defensive weapons are up. It's on.
That's why Case bravely climbs onto the hood to fix it, but this draws a hail of bullets from the other drivers on Jensen's car. Thanks to Jensen's sharp driving skills, he dodges the gunfire, and Case safely returns to the passenger seat. As the race intensifies, Jensen steals a defense manhole from Colt, but just like with the real Frankenstein, none of his defense systems work at that time.
Hey, Tom? Again?
The rear shield is quickly wearing down by the bullets being fired at. Thinking fast, Jensen comes up with a risky plan. He instructs Case to unhook the napalm canister and sit on his lap.
Let's go to my left.
What?
Then, he ejects her seat, which is now carrying the napalm, and it falls straight at Colt's car. The napalm smashes into Colt's vehicle, and Case follows up by throwing the car's lighter, igniting the napalm, and setting Colt's car on fire. With Colt eliminated, Jensen once again faces Joe head-to-head. Suddenly, Jensen notices Pachenko making a familiar hand gesture. It is the same one the man who killed his wife made before fleeing the scene. Distracted by this vision, Jensen loses focus. Joe seizes the opportunity and slams Jensen's car, which forces him into last place while Pachenko claims first. By the end of the race, 3 drivers are dead, and 6 remain for the next stage. Back at the garage, Coach and his team inspect the car and find no issues with the gadgets. They're baffled as to why the systems failed during the race. Jensen is now frustrated and suspicious about Hennessy. He confronts her after some time and accuses her of planning everything from framing him for his wife's murder, rigging the race, and using Pachenko to lure him into taking over as Frankenstein. Hennessy doesn't confirm his suspicions but counters with another threat. She shows Jensen a photo of his daughter, who is now in a foster home. Hennessy reminds Jensen that if he wants to see his daughter again, he needs to play along in the death race game. As Jensen is unable to do much about Hennessy's threats, he returns to the yard and chats with Coach. Jensen asks why Coach doesn't wear a prisoner number. So, Coach explains that he's technically not a prisoner anymore as he qualified for parole 3 years ago. However, he couldn't bring himself to leave this place as the outside world had changed too much, and he preferred the familiarity of the prison and its races. The coach also reveals that he doesn't believe Jensen killed his wife. Later that evening, while working on his car, Jensen spots Pachenko walking by and decides to follow him to his team's pit. There, Jensen is ambushed by Pachenko's men. Pachenko lands a few punches on Jensen before grabbing a heavy tool.
Killed my wife.
He intends to smash Jensen's head with this heavy tool despite knowing he's under Hennessy's protection. But, before Pachenko can strike, Lists intervenes and stabs Pachenko in the back with a pen. Seizing the moment, Jensen grabs a metal stick from the ground and uses it to stab one of Pachenko's men. He then knocks out his captors and then turns his attention to Pachenko. He starts punching Pachenko, throwing him into nearby equipment and slamming him into crates. Finally, Pachenko admits that Hennessy ordered him to kill Jensen's wife and that Ulrich was the one who brought him to the house. Just as Jensen is about to deliver a fatal blow, Ulrich and another guard arrive there and break up the fight, pulling Jensen away. The next day, just before the second stage of the race begins, Pachenko taunts Jensen again, repeating the same hand gesture that haunted him the night his wife was killed. This time, when the race begins, Jensen deliberately starts driving slowly and takes a tunnel to have a private conversation with Case. In the tunnel, Jensen accuses Case of possibly killing the real Frankenstein.
Did you kill the old Frank?
What?
He points out the suspicious failure of the car's gadgets in 2 consecutive races. When she hesitates to answer, Jensen threatens to eject her from the car if she doesn't reply to him honestly. Seeing this, Case confesses that she sabotaged Frank's rear weapons under Hennessy's orders. Actually, she was lured by the promise of her freedom. She insists the goal was never to kill Frank. It was an accident caused by Frank's desperate attempt to win without functional weapons. Hennessy's real aim was to ensure Frank lost, so she could keep him in prison and exploit his fame for the show. With his suspicions confirmed, Jensen shifts gears and speeds back into the race. For now, he ignores Joe and sets his sights clearly on Pachenko.
He's going after Pachenko.
The two clash on the track repeatedly and attempt to force each other off, but neither succeeds. Jensen then takes a bold strategy as he activates the weapon's manhole instead of the defense system. This puzzles everyone since his car's weapons are mounted at the front. Moments later, Jensen surprises the entire crowd by spinning the car around and driving backward. He then shoots a barrage of gunfire on Pachenko's vehicle. Once the damage is severe enough, Jensen turns back around and releases a smoke screen.
Hit the smoke.
This smoke makes Pachenko crash into a concrete barrier. After that, Jensen stops his car, steps out, and approaches Pachenko. Without hesitation, he breaks Pachenko's neck in cold blood and avenges his wife. Meanwhile, Joe decides to swap out his navigator in the middle of the race. Just then, Hennessy seizes the opportunity to unveil the secret weapon she's been preparing for weeks.
Release the dreadnought.
It is a massive, heavily armed tanker truck dubbed Dreadnought. The Dreadnought is terrifying and unmatched in power. It tears through the track, swiftly catching up with the racers and immediately obliterating 2 minor competitors. Its sheer size and firepower give it another advantage. Moreover, it's allowed to enter buildings on the course, which enables it to take a shortcut and reappear at the front of the race. The Dreadnought methodically targets 14K's navigator and slowly tortures him before using chains to grab his car and fire at it until it bursts into flames. With only Jensen and Joe remaining, the race seems impossible to win without a plan. Just then, Jensen asks Lists to connect his communicator to Joe's car, and the two agree to form an alliance. Together, they flank the Dreadnought and skillfully dodges its relentless attacks. When they encounter a trap manhole, both drivers hit it with 2 wheels to activate the trap and force the Dreadnought to crash into it. With the Dreadnought disabled, the second stage ends. Only Jensen and Joe are now left to proceed to the final race. Later that evening, Joe approaches Jensen in the pit. He notes that Jensen's voice suspiciously resembles Frank's. Meanwhile, Hennessy and Ulrich decide that Jensen must be eliminated in the final game. The next day, just before the final stage of the race begins, Ulrich places a bomb under Jensen's car, while Hennessy distracts everyone with a speech about racing being their purpose. As she mentions that this could be the first time someone wins their freedom with a 5th victory, Jensen realizes something disturbing. He thinks that Hennessy has rigged the races all along to eliminate anyone who could win a 5th time. No one has ever reached that milestone because of the system's manipulation. That means, like all the others before him, he won't be allowed to win today either. Coach has also heard Jensen's realization about the race rigging, so he shows Jensen a crucial detail from a video of Grimm's death. This sparks an idea in Jensen's mind, and he asks Lists to install a half-gallon reserve tank in his car. He then visits Joe's pit to propose another collaboration. While Jensen changes into Frank's clothes, Hennessy visits him with his release papers and a new offer. She says that if Jensen wins today, she wants him to stay in prison as Frankenstein to continue the legacy. She argues that an ex-convict like him wouldn't be able to provide his daughter with a good life, and staying in the race would be the ultimate selfless act of love. Jensen takes the release papers but says nothing. He keeps the papers in his pocket. As Jensen prepares for the race, Case reveals that Hennessy also spoke to her and asked her to stop Jensen if he were about to win. Jensen isn't worried, though. When the race begins, Ulrich manipulates the manholes. He only activates the manholes when Joe drives over them. Then, Ulrich opens fire on Jensen and damages his back shield so severely that he's forced to drop it. However, Joe already knows how to dodge such attacks, having learned from Frank's past tricks. Hennessy, eager to keep the audience engaged, activates a defense manhole for Jensen, but Joe counters with a rocket that destroys it. Joe keeps launching rockets at Jensen, but Jensen skillfully dodges them, letting them crash into a wall, which is an old weak spot from Grimm's death. Jensen and Joe had planned this moment. The rockets hit the wall's weak point, finally opening a hole large enough for the two of them to escape. Instead of racing for victory or staying in the game, they've engineered their final act of rebellion, which is escaping the prison and breaking free from the system Hennessy controlled. In a fit of rage, Hennessy ends the stream and sends every available cop after Jensen and Joe.
Shut it down.
Shut the fucking computers down now!
She then presses the detonator for the bomb under Jensen's car. However, her plan fails because Coach and his crew have already removed and deactivated the bomb. Meanwhile, Jensen and Joe speed toward the bridge, but the police cars are closing in. It's time for the next part of their escape plan. Jensen releases the extra half-gallon reserve tank, which he had planned to drop earlier. The tank hits the pursuing police cars, causing an explosion and a fiery wall that blocks the path of police and prevents any more vehicles from following them. The two convicts manage to make it across the bridge gates. They then split up onto two different roads to confuse the helicopters that are hot on their tail. The helicopters focus on Jensen, as he is the most important target. Meanwhile, Case agrees to help Jensen with the final stage of the plan because she feels she owes it to Frank, and since Hennessy has already given her release papers, she's confident they'll let her go once it's all over. As they drive past construction cranes, Jensen takes the opportunity to leap off the car and hide beneath their shadows. Case takes over the wheel and drives a little farther before the helicopters force her to stop with a wall of fire. When she exits the car with her hands raised in surrender, she's wearing Frank's clothes and mask, so now she has taken his place. This twist leaves everyone confused. The Case is now assuming the identity of Frankenstein and helping Jensen to escape from Hennessy's grip. Case is arrested by the cops and taken back to prison, while Jensen successfully escapes. He meets up with Joe, and the two board a train together, leaving the chaos behind them. Meanwhile, in the prison offices, Ulrich watches as the ratings soar to new heights, with congratulatory gifts already rolling in. He opens a gift box, only to find it contains the bomb that Ulrich himself had planted under Jensen's car. Just then, the bomb detonates, killing both Ulrich and Hennessy in the explosion. Outside, Coach can be seen having activated the detonator, ensuring that the two corrupt figures are taken down. 6 months later, Jensen and Joe have settled in Santa Rosalia, Mexico. They have started fresh with a new life. They now run their own auto shop, working together as mechanics. Jensen has regained custody of his daughter, and everything seems to have fallen into place. Case is also now free after her release papers were finally processed. She visits them and brings a racing car for them to check out.